It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. First, I would like to apologize for capturing bad audio in Kelsey's volume. That was totally my bad, and I should have been better at the whole process. We were in a hotel room in New York City, and there was building and road works that were on next door. I'm sorry. But if you have been following the show, you would have heard this.
Let's say that you're actually a great surfer, right? Let's say you're really, truly an excellent surfer, but you have imposter syndrome. So you think you're not. You think you suck, right? So then what I would tell you is, and this is actually, I'm going to repitch Todd Herman's book, Alter Ego Effect, because he talks about this a lot. And he has a very specific strategy for doing this.
That was Tucker Max in Volume 4. Today is that day when we get to unpack my conversation with Todd Herman and his Wall Street Journal best-selling book, The Alter Ego Effect.
So, the alter ego effect it's a series of different psychological phenomenon that just operate naturally inside of the creative imagination of human beings, where there's I kind of unpack inside the book the different psychological switches that we get to pull that naturally draws out a different performance for us. But the alter ego itself, it comes from Cicero, who coined the term in 44 BC when he was writing a letter to a friend. And what's interesting to note about that is, so Cicero is one of the greatest Roman statesmen and philosophers to ever live. And either he's ranked as number 1 or number 2 kind of thing. So here is someone who has lasted the test of time. All right, so that's important.
Cicero. Do you know who this dude is? I'll save you the Wikipedia search. Marcus Tullius Cicero was a Roman statesman, orator, lawyer, and philosopher who served as consul in the year 63 BC. He is considered one of Rome's greatest orators and prose stylists. His influence on Latin language was so immense that the subsequent history of prose, not only in Latin but in European languages up to the 19th century, was said to be either a reaction against or a return to his style. Okay, Todd. Cicero is important. What's the second thing?
Second thing is he wrote this letter a year before he was assassinated. So this is someone who's got a level of wisdom that he is now passing on to a friend because he's lived a good long life, okay? And he's used this idea of an alter ego to help a friend navigate the natural kind of trials and tribulations of life. And when he said the alter ego, he meant the other I or trusted friend to bring inside of the 6 inches of your ears. And that's important because we've already unpacked and talked about how the importance of having allies and friends and great mentors and leaders around us. We all already understand all that. And yet most people live such a lonely existence between the 6 inches of their ears. And that's where this becomes a really powerful idea that now you can actually start to use our greatest gift, which is our creative imagination. It is truly the thing that makes us unique as something on the planet. Mm-hmm. It is. I will go to the floor with anyone on what makes us unique on the planet.
I know it's early in the volume, but this line is important.
And yet most people live such a lonely existence between the 6 inches of their ears.
Sometimes all the people around you matter less than your forever roommate.
Because that's your brain is your forever roommate, right? Yeah. You share your mind with your brain. Yeah. So you need to practice makes perfect, for the brain. So you need to have the brain experience it again and again and again, so it starts working more for you than against you. So that's how I use virtual reality to kind of upgrade your mind game by having you practice it again and again and again.
That was Alda Karen from Volume 3. I bring her in because that one line is so important that we kind of brush over it. That one line being, and yet most people live such a lonely existence between the 6 inches of their ears. Probably because it's so true that we don't really want to sit with it. Probably because it's just a passing statement and I'm making too much of it. What if I asked you to consider this? What if all the systems and structures and institutions around us are built for us to believe that we need something or someone to be happy and fulfilled, to make us happy and fulfilled? And we are on this constant hamster wheel to make some imaginary version of ourselves happy.
Now, I'm not saying some people aren't driven by their mission. Some people are. But it's easy to conflate those two, and a lot of people convince themselves it's about mission when really it's about I'm going to show daddy or whatever, right? I definitely know people who I think maybe started to fill a void, but then they kind of accomplished what they were looking for, and it wasn't satisfactory. And so then how do you keep going?
That was Tucker Max from Volume 4, and the reason I wanted to bring these pieces of audio in is because of what Todd is going to tell us next. Because he was telling us what is the ability that makes us different to all other animals on the planet.
It is not our ability to love, and affection, because other animals have all that. But our ability to create narrative, to create story, to build worlds in our minds, to create heavens from hell, hell from heaven, that is something that we are truly gifted with. And an alter ego, building it as a trusted friend that helps you just navigate those insecurities that might stop you from going out onto that stage and giving your best presentation, and falling prey to just what other people are going to think of me. This is a new idea, whatever is going on in someone's mind. But that alter ego wouldn't have that thought, because now you're channeling an energy that doesn't exist in that same worldview. It's a wonderful idea to say, oh, but just love yourself. Like, just accept yourself. Accept the fact that you're not at the level, that's wonderful, okay?
I would like to say something important here. I recommend reading or listening to Todd's book, The Alter Ego Effect. This volume is my interpretation of Todd's work, and Todd is very clear on who he's here to help.
I'm always extremely honest about what I'm here to help people with, where people would, I say it in the, the groups, I say it on stage that, I'm not here to coach people on their happiness. I'm here to help you perform. So whatever that might mean to you, and whether your takeaway from that is you're happy about it, because happiness, I think, is a very, personal thing. And I don't think someone else can do that for you. Like, I'm not here to make you happy. But it's also coming from a very honest place, because I always struggled with the feeling of happiness. I've been very good at finding flow state and getting into the zone, because that's what I've taught for such a long time. And all the systems that I try to create are about really helping people to get there. But happiness has been always a very elusive little worm to me in some ways.
He does help people perform. The list of A-list celebrities and athletes that Todd coaches is no secret. I know Todd helps some high-performing people do some amazing stuff. And what I wanted to know from Todd was, what was the narrative that we didn't even know we were subconsciously believing? I mean, what if we were unconsciously creating an alternate reality for ourselves that we didn't even know was driving our decisions?
I mean, we are bombarded every single day from media, from social media. We're all looking at highlight reels and outcomes, and you don't have this, but if you bought this, then you could have this, right? Like that narrative and that storytelling, which is incessant, and it's being done by professionals in order to create insecurities in people so that they go and they buy the things, is so pervasive. And it's, now it's producing a culture, which I'm a part of, that has extraordinary levels of depression, extraordinary levels of loneliness, of disconnectedness, of, suicide rates amongst teenagers right now are, at the last time I checked, at an all-time high. Yeah. That's an indictment 100% on the way that we're approaching things. And yet, this rocket ship is speeding so fast that most people aren't even aware that that is the pervasive disease that's rotting away at people's sense of self, their self-worth, like what they think that they can do. Like it's, and I know, cause I mean, it would be very easy for me to get caught up in it, but I literally coach people on this like every single day.
Did you know the state of Michigan in the United States requires 1,460 days of education and training to become an athletic trainer, but just 26 to be an emergency medical technician?
Interesting, right? One of the big reasons that I wanted to create and host this show is because I wanted to get the reps in. I'm doing air quotes here for reps. I wanted to know the things that made me better at what I do, if that makes any sense. So I was curious about what kind of reps Todd did every single day.
I start each of my days with writing a personal handwritten note. Have since I was 22. I've written over 4,700 personal letters to people. That's how I start my day. A lot of people, they talk about having a gratitude journal. I think that's one way of doing it. I like taking the idea of gratitude and taking it, not just holding on to it myself, but passing it off to someone and something else. And so I write that handwritten note. It's just one single sheet, 6x9 piece of paper. And I just, an expression of gratitude to someone who's written a book or has just achieved something. And this goes out to people that I've never even met a lot of times. Daniel Day-Lewis, I wrote to him. He sent me back a letter. Philip Seymour Hoffman, before he passed away, he sent me back a letter as well. And you know what the number one response is that people give to me or I've replied back with? Because at the bottom of my letterhead, it has my email address or my home address and my phone number. Number one response, like bar none, it's not even close, is you have no idea how much I needed to get this today. Which simply goes back to our conversation around a lot of people feel disconnected. A lot of people don't get the message. A lot of people, they've read The Alter Ego Effect and they don't reach out and say, hey, thank you so much for reading the book, or whatever the book is by someone. And yet, and so there's, now 30,000 plus people that have read the book in the first month or listened to the audiobook.
That's crazy, by the way.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. And I do get a lot of great feedback. But in proportion to the amount of people who have it, it's not even it's a dent. It's a dent, right? So that's what I do. But anyways, I have it all in one box. All the instruments, all the tools that I need in order to execute that thing are inside, to execute that act are inside one box. And then when I end my day, that's the first thing that I put on the middle of my desk is that box. Right. It's a grease slide. It's a reminder. Now I don't need to do it. I've done it 4,000 times. I don't really need to do it as a habit because it's the first thing I look for doing and it's something I look forward to. But that's an example of my environment is dictating the behavior, not me sitting down and actively having to think about it. It's like, no, I'm ending my day in a way that helps grease the slide for success tomorrow.
Okay, so the Alter Ego Effect is not only just a nice sounding name for a book. It is based on very sound framework, which Todd calls the field of play model. This field of play model is based on multiple layers, which I will attempt to explain using an excerpt from his book about the enemy. The enemy is kind of that voice we have inside us that is trying to protect us from the unknown. Quote, "The enemy uses all the layers to challenge you. It tells you things like, you're not meant for that. After all, nobody from your family has ever done that. That's at the core driver's layer. In the belief layer, you don't believe in yourself because if you just take a look at your past, you've quit on a lot of things. In the action layer, you don't have the skills or knowledge, so you should probably just wait until you do more research, work on it more, and finally get it perfect. The field of play layer, you don't want to make a fool of yourself. Are you sure you want to take such a huge risk? I'd hate for everyone to see what happens if you fail." End quote. Again, get the book. To combat the enemy, we have the heroic self. But Todd, let's define not the enemy, but let's define the heroic self here.
So the definition that I would give to people, and I talk about in the book, is, so people say best self, I would classify it as that heroic self, where in that moment, we all have these different moments of impact that, it's those moments that they carry super high levels of possible, impact towards whatever the goals are that we're trying to pursue, or the moments that help us to succeed in whatever the endeavor is. And I think it's that moment where you're like, I showed up as this heroic self, like, everything that I know that I can do came out of me, like all the capabilities I had, all the preparation, it came out into that moment. And whether or not the result worked out for you, that's not what not what matters. Is like, did I give my best situation?
Todd just said, whatever the endeavor. Can this be applied to other parts of my life?
And kind of the story to sort of illustrate it is with my middle daughter, Sophie. I like telling parenting stories more than I like telling business stories because I think they're more relatable. Yeah. But Sophie is that classic middle child. I am one as well, who has a emotional barometer that can fluctuate rapidly. And she's an absolute, she's such a joy because she really tests your parenting skills. And I love her for it. But she has also, I have this thing called misophonia. Misophonia is an inner ear condition where there are certain decibel of sounds that drive you into a rage, like they drive you crazy.
Again, doing this search for you, according to WebMD, misophonia is a disorder in which certain sounds trigger emotional or psychological responses that some might perceive as unreasonable given the circumstance. Those who have misophonia might describe it as when a sound drives you crazy. Their reactions can range from anger and annoyance to panic and the need to flee.
And so her scream is that decibel level that it can make you just go crazy. Like, and you need to physically remove yourself from the situation because it just makes you that mad. Anyway, I've had it ever since I was a little kid. And so whenever she was going to have a tantrum, which can last for a long time, as a parent, I'm going to meet that force with my force of parenting, and you stop that right now and all that kind of stuff. And that's a great example of me not showing up as that heroic self. That's just a default behavior. That's you reacting instead of responding. And I caught myself, and I kind of teach this concept in the book of using an alter ego or something that inspires you as a different trait to bring out. And I was like, wait a second, like I'm not showing up like I know that I can. And, the skills that I've developed over my life. And Mr. Rogers is that person who inspires me at home. Like, if I could show up like him consistently, what could that do for my kids? And then what does that do for your sense of self and your own capabilities? Because now you're drawing on other qualities.
When we come back, what works when you're 4 days out from stepping out on the courts of the US Open?
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
The main objective of this audio documentary is to bring together entrepreneurs and creatives who share similar values in a place where conversations can be had without judgment. A place where our listeners can give us constructive feedback to improve the show with topic and guest recommendations. For access to this space, go to mustamplify.com/POE and click the button.
Before the break, we broke down the concepts of the alter ego effect. It is the ability for one to challenge their heroic self in situations where the enemy's voice is loud enough that it hampers our performance. That's what I think anyway. But where does it work?
I get paid for results, period, right? I can't share ideas like that with people who are striving because here's the answer. They won't work. Okay, so, we do these things all the time naturally. And yet a lot of people, and that's what, a big portion of, me sharing this idea with people is to show just how normal this is when I share the countless stories of people throughout history that have used this idea or pointed to its effectiveness but just didn't have the language to describe it, right? Like I've been using this for 16 years with people. This is actually what I'm known for in pro athletics and Olympic athletics, is specifically building an alter ego. Why? Because when you're 4 days out from stepping onto the floor of the US Open or the courts at the US Open, I would love it if meditation cured you immediately of whatever that was that's stopping you. It doesn't. It's an amazing long-term strategy. But when I'm paid to come in on the Wednesday and they're playing on a Saturday, I need to give you something that's going to work right now. And there was nothing that I could ever do that would be faster than helping people build a powerful ally between the 6 inches of their ears that would push that enemy to the sidelines that was somehow stopping them. And now they were acting through something far more powerful. You know, even using that trusted friend, that alter ego, to help you navigate that imposter syndrome. You know, so for Martin Luther King, when I did a speech in 2004 and I talked on stage about the fact that I wore glasses and I had non-prescription glasses and I used them when I first started out to do what I called my reverse Superman. Superman put on the glasses to become the mild-mannered Clark Kent. I put them on to become, you know, Super Richard. Richard's my first name. I have always gone by Todd, but in my mind, when I was stepping into that Super Richard in business, I was activating the qualities now of someone who was confident, decisive, and articulate. All the qualities I was lacking at the time with the way that I was showing up.
Super Richard. Did you know my dad's name is Richard? He's definitely Super Richard. Creating alter egos can work both ways too. I'm sure if you can create a superhero, you can create a villain that feels like the world is a mean place and it's your responsibility to restore balance to the universe by wiping out half of all living beings. That's a reference to Thanos, by the way.
And I always ask people, you know, who is the, you know, when I'm standing on stage, who is the alter ego, Clark Kent or Superman? And people think alter ego meaning the superpower version, so they say Superman. No, the alter ego was actually Clark Kent, because that was his way of adopting a mild-mannered version of himself that was going to be accepted by society. Well, if you really take a look at how most people act in their lives, they have a mild-mannered version of themselves that's enclosed in whatever they're using right now to go out so that they're accepted by people. Because we as a species, we are tribal. We don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. And so that's why my approach to people is, no, I know that there's a Superman or Superwoman living inside of you right now. And my job is to help delete and subtract so that that heroic self shows up more, even if it's 50% more. That 50%, when extrapolated out over the course of time, ends up being a geometric change. So when I shared that on stage about how I use the glasses, then this lady came up to me afterwards and she said, I loved your talk. Specifically, I love the fact that you wore fake glasses because Martin didn't wear glasses either. And when I looked down at her name badge, it was Coretta Scott King.
Coretta Scott King was an American author, activist, civil rights leader, and the wife of Martin Luther King Jr. An active advocate for African American equality, she was a leader for the civil rights movement in the 1960s. King was also a singer who had often incorporated music into her civil rights work. The best part of my job is learning new things. And in researching Coretta Scott King, I found a 1968 Harvard class day, which she started just like this.
Gentlemen of the graduating class of 1968, your parents and friends, it is indeed a humbling experience for me to have been invited by you to give your class day address. In trying to perform this awesome task, which my late husband would have done with great ease, I feel a deep sense of inadequacy.
Insane when you think about something Todd said earlier.
And yet most people live such a lonely existence between the 6 inches of their ears.
I'm making a point. We all feel it in some way.
Did you know, although social media has been partly blamed for the growing epidemic of loneliness, Grassnet's survey also showed that almost 59% of respondents reported to feeling less lonely when online, and almost 82% found it easier to talk about being lonely when online.
We just got past the 40-year anniversary of one of the greatest creative creations that was used in the music world, which was David Bowie's creation of Ziggy Stardust.
Again, helping you by doing the research and searching for you in the hope that you will leave me a review and rating. Just kidding. Not. According to Wikipedia, Ziggy Stardust is a character created by David Bowie in 1971 and first featured on the album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, released on 16 June 1972. The character was retired on the 3rd of July 1973.
40th anniversary of Ziggy Stardust coming out. And he used, if there's an entertainer that has most prolifically used this concept as a way of finding new ways to express his creative abilities, it is David Bowie. In the many, many avatars that he created for himself to go and try on new creative outlets for himself. And he's definitely the poster boy of it. And there's nothing wrong with it. But people will immediately go, yeah, I can get how an athlete uses it, or I get how, entertainer uses it, but, I'm a housewife, or I'm a stay-at-home dad, or I'm a salesperson, or I'm an entrepreneur. All of those still mean that you've got to perform. You're not performing on a stage in that context, but you are there to create the best result that you want, right? Like, none of us want to live in an ordinary world. None of us do. We all have aspired to live in, like I talk about in the book, the extraordinary world, where, life seems to have more meaning for you, and you are acting with more intention, and you are showing up like you know that you can.
The point is that anyone can use the alter ego effect in a variety of different situations. So, for you listening, did you ever wonder what the most popular alter ego ever is? I want you to think about that. Take your time. Because I can safely say that you've guessed it wrong.
And sometimes people have a tough time believing that they can do it, but they don't have a tough time believing that Oprah could do it, or they don't have a tough time believing that Ellen DeGeneres can do it, or, insert any name of a character in a movie, or a character in a favorite nonfiction or fiction piece, or an entertainer, whatever it might be, or an animal, which is a very popular one. You know what the most popular alter ego is that's used?
Spirit animal?
No. Grandma.
What?
Yep. Grandmother is the most popular alter ego that I have seen used amongst people, both men and women. For some people, it's that classic idea where I have a client here in New York City who's a very wealthy man who his grandmother or her husband died in World War II in the Nazi concentration camps. She came over with 4 children, raised them in the Lower East Side in the kind of the slums down there. Those 4 grew up to be, two of them became wealthy real estate developers. One was a very accomplished university professor at an Ivy League school. And the 4th one was, or 2 of them were doctors and one was a real estate investor. And then my client is the son of one of those. And he got to be around his grandmother, who just sort of, had this iron rod up her spine, but handled everyone with like that kind of, that kit glove, but you didn't want to cross her kind of thing, because she was so principled. It was kind of that walk softly, but carry a big stick type of thing. And he was someone who definitely got his way through just sheer grit and ambition and hard charging personality. But now that he was in this huge leadership position in his company, that was just burning out staff, and his churn rate was so high. And I'm like, how's that working for you, buddy? Right? And it wasn't. And so, in us unpacking for him, who would be that kind of mentor or ally that you'd bring into your mind? He was going to like the classic, Jack Welch or all these kind of things. And he would say the names, and I'm just watching, for some sort of reaction physically from people. And then we got off topic a little bit. He started talking about his grandma, and I could see his entire state change when he would talk about her. And then, our conversation got brought back to this idea of who that inspiration would be. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not any of these people. Jack Welch doesn't even hold a candle to your grandma. And he's like, you're right. None of them do. So he has a frame on his desk. And anytime he needs to have a tough conversation or a leadership conversation with any of his team, he just turns that frame of his grandmother to face him. And what's really important about this, and why you want to have a resonant connection with that alter ego, is because you really want to embody the fact that you do not want to dishonor who and what they represent by you showing up as that imposter self or that, muted self for some people. No, because your grandmother wouldn't do that.
Because your grandmother wouldn't do that. Sometimes we don't know why we look up to certain people. Sometimes we do because everyone is doing it. Sometimes it's because we want only portions of their lives.
Like, think about the heroes that we have. I mean, so many entrepreneurs want to be Steve Jobs. Good luck. I have no interest on earth of being Steve Jobs. And I go, why do you want to be Steve Jobs? Well, look what he did. Yeah, exactly, look what he did. So socially and personally, his life was a complete mess. He had very destructive relationships and he wasn't very nice to people, okay?
Sometimes we don't know why we look up to certain people. Sometimes something from the past makes us believe certain things, especially events that have emotional charge attached to them. Horrific events, happy events, proud events, sad events, and every other emotion in between. Todd shares a horrific event that happened to him when he was a kid. I did not want to be specific about the event because it isn't my event to explain. But it was a horrific event, and I hope that no one ever experiences one like that. This is the part of the conversation when Todd explains how he felt immediately after that happened.
I always thought of myself as a pretty smart kid, and so I thought I was very stupid to have that happen. But I mean, it's so nefarious because they had done it obviously to other people with how crafty they were in the, conditioning of me. And so when I got home, I dropped my duffel bag off at the front door, went over, we grew up on a big farm and ranch in Western Canada, and walked into the backyard where we had just put in a pool and, got changed, jumped into the pool, and then tried to drown myself in the pool. So I thought, that would be just a way to end it. Because I can't, you extrapolate things out in such a big way that you're so consumed by it that you can't see life being anything better than what it is right now, right? I mean, that's why people can get lost in suicide. You just cannot see a way out, which is why loneliness and depression and the way that people work nowadays is so dangerous, because people are isolating themselves. I mean, what's the fastest path to depression? Isolation. You put someone in an 8-foot cell in solitary confinement, and no wonder they come out crazy. It's just not the way that we're built to live. And then some people love to use the idea of, well, I'm shy. And I think we need to massively adjust what introversion actually means.
Yes.
Because it has nothing to do with you being alone. That is not what it means.
Yes.
And so, it obviously, it's very hard to drown yourself. Your body won't allow it. And then, it just got me kind of going down I've made some other poor decisions. That's one of my great skills, is that when I hear a throwaway comment like visualize, I immediately would go to my own personal experience. And I wouldn't go to my personal experience and say, oh, well, I don't know how to visualize, which means I'm an idiot because they're saying it as if it's so easy. I actually approached it far more like Seinfeld. Isn't it funny when?
For those of you from Mars, Seinfeld is an American live action sitcom created by David Larry and Jerry Seinfeld for NBC. Seinfeld is widely regarded as one of the greatest and most influential sitcoms of all time.
Right? So Seinfeld says the things that we all think. Yes. So anytime I would find that I wasn't able to do something, I would think, I'll bet 99% of human beings can't do it either. And so then I would just investigate it. And so when put underneath the microscope of, trying to do visualization, it's a skill. Like, you've got to learn. Just because we do it all day long doesn't mean that we can do it with intent easily, right? 70% of our brain is dedicated to the visual cortex. So, it sounds like this thing should be easy to do, but it's not. So then I was like, okay, well then how can I make visualization because it is really powerful for you to start to master the visual imagery that's happening in your mind and see the process for how you want it to show up for you, or how you want to show up. That's obvious. That's a powerful thing to be able to do. But then how can I actually get people to develop this skill? And you can give people audio tapes for them to listen to it and, visualize the process.
There must be a way to get people to visualize so that they can achieve flow state. Of course there is. And Todd is here to give us an example.
I found that there was no more powerful way to get people to learn how to visualize something, because I want them to slow the process down so they learn about zone and flow state, because your mind just moves so fast and you can think so much faster than you can write. But when you start writing, it slows the process down. So I developed this process, it's no big sexy name, just called scripting, where I would get an athlete to script out exactly how they want to show up and perform in a game or a match or something like that. And so it would sound something like this. As my skates touch the ice, I feel this rush of confidence flood my legs and up into my body. And with each stride and with each sharp sound of the blade cutting through the ice, I can feel the wind flowing through my hair as I start to do laps around the arena, and I start to really get into and calm the nerves that were jittering inside of me when I was in the locker room. And and so on and on like that, right? I'm trying to get them locked into the process, and more importantly, I want them locked into the emotional state that they want to be getting into.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Inevitable, once or twice, I'll be, driving in the car with my wife there, and I'll just break into tears. That's all because of internal pressure I put on myself. Doubts and that kind of stuff that flare up, like, why they come to listen to you, and you're gonna screw up on stage and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to eventually move, obviously, to a point where I don't impose so much, stress on myself and pressure on myself to perform, so to speak, leading up to an event.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Todd because he is the recipient of the Rama Award for Wisdom in Leadership and has personally coached the Spanish royal family. Author of The Alter Ego Effect, The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. His professional programs are delivered annually to over 200,000 professionals in 73 countries. His dyslexia is his superpower. Todd has trained some of the most elite athletes in the world, including high-performing Olympians. He's a father, husband, and friend.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing and sound design by Kelly Bonnyman and Joel Thomas. Voiceover by Sonia Stone. Fact voiceover by Kelly Bonnyman. Guest research and content by Claire Gould. Project managed by Shannon Morrison. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Hey, it's Kaylee from Must Amplify. I'm the sound engineer for this volume of Psychology of Entrepreneurship. I'm a part of the team that made this production come alive. Our team consists of members from all around the globe, with our headquarters based in West End, Brisbane, Australia, the land of the drop bear. For more about the cool stuff that we're up to and to work out of our studios, head to mustamplify.com.
You still listening? Thanks for sticking around. Here's a little gift for you.
We really love receiving your messages and support for Poe. Here's a message from Paul Smith.
Hey Ronsley, I just want to say thank you so much for putting something like that together. It's already given me so much, but also just shown me how not alone we are. I want to share this with people who've struggled to understand elements of what I go through, what people like us go through. Amazing job. It's gone way above where I thought you'd go, and again, I can only see it getting better. Thank you, mate.